Welcome back into HQ, presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. Here's the thing, we're entering week 15. It is playoffs in fantasy football, and as I am listening to our guys here during the commercial break, I am finding out there's a lot of backstabbing. There's a lot of secrets going on right now, but we're going to try to keep things clean to get you to the ultimate point, winning your fantasy league. The start of the week from our guys here, Brian Robinson Jr. coming off a bye with the Commanders, going up against the Saints. Jamie Eisenberg says he is in a great spot with fresh legs. Let's send it over to the guys who always keep things on the up and up, right?
Thank you, Amanda. Go watch Major League. Go watch Major League. Please go watch.
Explain, if people missed the commercial, why are you saying go watch Major League?
I led the story with,
it.
You know, the famous scene from Jake Taylor in the locker room. He says, there's only one thing left to do. Let's go win the whole bleeping thing.
Yeah.
And that's what you are. It's the fantasy playoffs. Got to go win the whole thing at this point. And really the point is, it doesn't matter who you have on your team because of who you drafted or because of holding on to somebody because you think this is going to be the week. You need the best players in your line. You need the most important
You need to win
matchup.
now.
You need to win now,
You
right?
need to win the whole bleeping thing now.
Travis Etienne, he's out of there. Debo Samuel, don't trust him at this point. Obviously, Kyle Pitts, he's been the Pitts, so you're not going to start, these guys when they're struggling when you have to win now. But one guy you should start, though, is Brian Robinson Jr. because he's coming into a great situation. He's had 2 games so far this season without Austin Eckler. It's been his 2 best games of the season, and Eckler's on IR dealing with that concussion. So it was 20-plus points in week 4 when Eckler was out against the Cardinals and 17-plus points as we saw against the Titans prior to their bye week. He's facing a Saints team that is just abysmal against the run. They've allowed 4 running backs in a row to get 18-plus PPR points or more, and I think we're going to see Robinson have another strong game. Dave, really, my only concern is that the Commanders are blowing out the Saints so badly that we saw the last time. It was Chris Rodriguez in the 4th quarter getting some of those fun points that we like to see because of those garbage time situations. So Rodriguez, to me, is a top 10 running back. I am going all in on him in this matchup against Saints.
Part of the reason why I can't put him in my top 12, but the matchup's amazing. The Saints' run defense has allowed 12 rushing touchdowns to a running back in their past 9 games, 13 touchdowns total. And listen to this, 10 running backs on the season have had at least 12 touches against the Saints this year. Each of them have had at least 16.8 PPR points. How can you beat that? That provides a nice safe floor for Brian Robinson, who's had at least 12 touches in all but 2 of his games this year.
Yep, and one of those was the last time he was the start of the week. He got hurt against the Cowboys. Hopefully,
wait a minute. So you're using a guy twice?
Second time I've done it, and the second time is better than the first time. So hopefully, like Brock Purdy, it will be a good situation for Brian Robinson as well. Let's talk about some starts and sits for us at some other spots. You see the list of guys here that I'm going with for Week 15. You can read a lot about them in Start 'em and Sit 'em on CBSSports.com. But let's talk about Jalen Waddle because I like him and you don't. And we're looking at a wide receiver here who's been really tough to trust. But this Texans defense has been absolutely awful lately, Dave. They've allowed 9 wide receivers in their last 6 games to go over 12.8 PPR points. And here's what I like about it. And you see we're actually having ranked.
We're the same.
To me, when we get to no teams on a bye, it's almost 36 as a number 2 wide receiver, in terms of the ranking.
Yeah,
here's what I like.
okay.
He's from Houston. I like the setup for those type of situations.
Yeah.
He's played the Texans twice in his career. He's had over 13 PPR points in both of those games without a touchdown. And 2 of the last 3 games, he's been 8-plus targets. This run game has been bad for the Dolphins. Now, I know they're missing some key parts on the Texans defense. They're also missing some key parts in the secondary. I think everybody's going to eat for Miami here, as we saw last week, where it took Jonnu Smith overtime, but Tyreek Hill was a monster. Devon Achane was a monster. Jalen Waddle was a monster. Tua Tagovailoa has been as hot as any quarterback for the last 4 weeks. 2 of those games has been because of Jalen Waddle. So I think he's a borderline must-start wide receiver.
I mean, if you were a borderline must-start fantasy wide receiver, I think you'd have him ranked higher than 28th. We're one spot apart. I feel like we don't even have to argue because I agree. I think if we're talking about him as a flex or as a number 3 wide receiver, you can't get away from what you've seen in 2 of the last 3 weeks. But those 2 games that were against the Jets and the Patriots, those are division rivals who didn't play a ton of zone coverage and who didn't put a lot of pressure on Tua Tagovailoa. And generally, teams don't get the chance to put pressure on Tua, and that meant some plays where Tua was able to sit in the pocket a little bit longer, wait a little bit longer to throw downfield to guys like Jalen Waddle. And normally he's getting the ball out really quick. He's going to have to do that against Houston because they can get pressure on him really, really quickly. They've got 2 of the best pass rushers in the league, and he's 4th. Since Tua's come back, he's 4th in target per route run rate amongst Dolphins players. You've got Tyreek, you've got Achane, you've got Jonnu Smith, who's come out of nowhere, literally came out of nowhere last week to have a good fantasy game. I think you just look at Jalen Waddle and you got to be a little bit cautious, which is why I've got him as a top 30 wide receiver and not a top 24 wide receiver. All
right, so we'll see how Waddle does in this matchup against Texas. Let's go now to the starts for you this week. And this is a curious one that you're going with here that we're highlighting in Jameis Winston because we got word on Thursday that he may not have one of his best weapons in David Njoku. According to reports, he may not be able to play Njoku because of the hamstring injury. Do you still like Jameis going against the Chiefs if he doesn't have really his second best pass catcher?
Yeah, and this is his short area target too, and his red zone guy. So someone else is going to have to step up for Cleveland in the event that Njoku doesn't play, and I don't think we should expect Njoku to play, but Cedric Tillman might play, and that might be close enough to a one-to-one replacement for this Browns passing offense. And I just think that game script is going to be favorable for Jameis Winston. The Browns can't run. The Chiefs can stop the run. The Chiefs struggle to stop the pass. They lost one of their best cornerbacks in Joshua Williams, and so Jameis with volume, and we've seen it before, where he gets a lot of volume, he puts up huge fantasy points. He doesn't do that against the Steelers, but he does it against pretty much everybody else. 3 or 4 games where he's had at least 41 pass attempts. He's come through for at least 29 fantasy points. He's a low-end starter for me, even without David Njoku.
All right, if Njoku's out, you see he's 14th for me. He'll probably drop to about 16th. I would still consider starting him. Sportsline is out on Jameis Winston, 28th quarterback for this week. And for what it's worth, a lot of the success for quarterbacks against the Chiefs have been using the tight ends. They're one of the worst teams at defending the position. So we will see how this tests
Blake Whiteheart, baby. He'll get in there.
We will see how this tests Jameis Winston looking at the situation here, just to see if he can survive and be successful without David Njoku. Again, not officially out, but that's the way it's trending. All right, here are the sits for you for Week 15. And the guy that we're going to highlight here is Zay Flowers taking on the Giants. They are over 2 touchdown favorites here. Some see 14.5, some see 15 in terms of the spread here for a team that's on the road. We know the Giants stink, so is it really just avoid Zay Flowers altogether?
It's avoid Zay Flowers. You can call him a flex, and I would put him in that same boat as Jalen Waddle. I actually like Waddle better than Zay Flowers, but this just feels like a game where the Ravens are going to be able to run their way to victory. Not a lot for Lamar to do, certainly not a lot for Zay Flowers to do, and he's not as big of a factor, not just in the red zone, but inside the 10. Definitely at the goal line, that's all Derrick Henry. But when they're inside the 10, it's usually Mark Andrews. It's not even close to being Zay Flowers. He makes me nervous, no better than a number 3 receiver. Not even a great flex play, not even in non-PPR.
The type of player Zay Flowers is, if Lamar wants to find him open, he will find him open.
Then why doesn't he find him open more often?
I think just part of it is in this game in particular. Like, the Giants can't stop anything that Baltimore wants to do. So I agree with you. He's more of a number 3 receiver. It's a risky number 3 play because the targets may not be there for him. But one play for Zay Flowers can obviously make his production. So he's in that mix of wide receivers. Like I said, when you really get to how deep that group is and all the talent and good matchups that they have, I still think he could be considered a starter.
And I know you like Lamar this week. You obviously don't love Jameis this week. What about Jordan Love?
Jordan Love's a concern. You know, when you look at what the situation is for him, 4 of his last 6 games, he's been under 20 fantasy points. And Josh Jacobs is a big reason why he's been so successful, why the Packers have been so successful. Obviously not why Jordan Love is helping them win games from a high-end statistical standpoint. And this Seahawks defense has been great. They've held 5 quarterbacks in a row to 21.9 fantasy points or more, or less, which isn't exactly the worst number, but we've seen Kyler Murray, for example, 2 games under 20 fantasy points. I just don't think the volume has been there for Jordan Love, and you see what he did against the Lions in a very competitive game. A lot of it was short fields, so take that into account. But only 20 pass attempts. That's Josh Jacobs. His impact on the Packers offense this year has taken away from Jordan Love. I don't like the setup for Jayden Reed, who we've seen his targets have disappeared. We may see a big play or 2 for Christian Watson, but just the setup for Jordan Love right now is not the best when you have all these great quarterbacks available to you for Week 15. Make sure you check out our Fantasy Football Today podcast. We have our starts and sits from the AFC home games on Thursday. Tomorrow we'll get into the NFC home games. We may fool Dave on the game of the week. Check that out. You can find it on the check the QR code as well, and also check us out on YouTube.